The room at the funeral home was completely silent. Not the respectful kind of silence, the uncomfortable kind. The kind where people avoid looking directly at you. Because everyone in that room believed something about me. Something terrible. My parents had already told the entire family the story. They said I abandoned my grandmother in the hospital. They said I never visited her. They said she died alone because of me. And judging by the way my relatives were staring, they believed every word. My aunt wouldn't even look at me. My cousin whispered something under her breath. Someone behind me actually said the word heartless. I stood there quietly next to my grandmother's casket, listening to people judge me, listening to my parents accept sympathy for something they knew was a lie. Then the lawyer stood up. He cleared his throat and said something that made the entire room freeze. "Before we continue," he said, "your grandmother asked that we play a recording." My mother's face changed immediately. My father looked like he had stopped breathing, because whatever was on that recording, they knew exactly what it contained. Before I explain what happened next, my name is Natalie Brooks. I'm 27 years old, and this happened last year in Columbus, Ohio. Before I continue, if you enjoy stories where the truth finally comes out at exactly the right moment, consider subscribing. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is right now. I read every single comment. Now let me explain why my parents told everyone I abandoned my grandmother, because the truth is far worse than anyone in that room expected. According to my parents, the story was simple. They told relatives that my grandmother had been hospitalized for 3 weeks, and during that entire time, I never visited her. They said I ignored every phone call. They said I refused to help. By the time she passed away, the entire family believed I had abandoned her, and my parents repeated that story to anyone who would listen. The worst part wasn't just the lie, it was how quickly people believed it. My aunt stopped returning my messages. My cousin unfollowed me on social media. Even family members I barely spoke to began sending passive-aggressive texts. Things like, "Family should show up when it matters." No one asked me what actually happened. My grandmother Eleanor wasn't just another relative. She helped raise me. When my parents worked late, she watched me. When I struggled in school, she helped me study. She was the only person in the family who never compared me to anyone else. So the idea that I would abandon her didn't even make sense. But the lie spread anyway. Grandma was admitted to Riverside Medical Center in early March. The doctors said she needed observation for heart complications. My parents told everyone they were handling everything. They said they would keep the family updated. And at first, I believed them. 3 days after she was admitted, I tried calling my grandmother's hospital room. No answer. I assumed she was asleep. So I called my mother. She told me visiting hours were restricted. "Don't worry about it," she said. "We're taking care of everything." At the time, I trusted her. That turned out to be a mistake. A week later, I tried again. This time, I called the hospital directly. The nurse sounded confused. "Are you family?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "I'm her granddaughter." There was a pause. Then the nurse said something that made my stomach tighten. "She hasn't had visitors." That didn't make sense. My parents told everyone they visited her daily. They said they were bringing her meals, sitting with her, helping the doctors make decisions. But according to the nurse, no one had visited at all. I drove to the hospital the next day, but when I reached the reception desk, the staff member looked at the computer and frowned. "I'm sorry," she said. "You're not listed as an approved visitor." Approved visitor? That didn't make sense either. I asked who was on the list. The receptionist hesitated. Then she answered, "Your parents. And one attorney." An attorney? That was the moment I realized something was very wrong. I called my mother immediately. She sounded irritated. "Natalie, we're busy handling things." "What attorney?" I asked. There was a long pause on the phone. Then she said something I still remember perfectly. "That's none of your concern." And that was the moment I knew. My parents weren't just lying to the family. They were hiding something much bigger. After that phone call with my mother, something didn't feel right. Hospitals don't normally block family members from visiting, especially grandchildren. So the next morning, I drove back to Riverside Medical Center. This time, I didn't go to the front desk. I went straight to the cardiology floor where my grandmother's room was. When I reached the hallway, her room door was closed, and there was a visitor restriction notice taped beside it. A nurse noticed me standing there. "Are you looking for someone?" she asked. "My grandmother," I said. "Eleanor Brooks." The nurse checked the chart. Then her expression changed slightly. "You're Natalie?" I nodded. She hesitated. Then she lowered her voice. "She's been asking about you." That sentence made my stomach drop. "Asking about me?" I said. "Yes," the nurse replied. "She keeps saying she hasn't seen you in weeks." Weeks? But my parents had told everyone I refused to visit, that I ignored her, which meant something else was happening, something deliberate. I asked the nurse about the visitor list again. She showed me the screen quietly. Only 3 names were approved: my mother, my father, and a man named Daniel Harris, the attorney. My name wasn't there. Not even listed as family. The nurse glanced down the hallway before speaking again. "She actually asked us to call you." My heart skipped. "She did?" The nurse nodded. "But we were told not to." "By who?" I asked. She didn't answer immediately. Then she said the words that explained everything. "Your parents." I stepped outside and called my father. He answered after 3 rings. "What's going on?" I asked. "You told everyone you visit her every day." "We do," he said quickly. "But the hospital says she hasn't had visitors." There was a long silence. Then he said something that made my chest tighten. "You should stop interfering." That word stood out. Interfering? With what? "She's my grandmother," I said. "I'm going to see her." "No," my father replied immediately. "It's better if you stay out of this." The way he said it didn't sound concerned. It sounded controlled. Later that afternoon, I looked up the attorney's name: Daniel Harris, estate lawyer. That was strange. Why would an estate lawyer be visiting my grandmother in the hospital? Unless something legal was happening, something involving money or inheritance. If you're still listening to this story, thank you. Situations like this remind us how quickly family narratives can be manipulated, and if you've ever had someone twist the truth about you, you probably understand how frustrating this moment felt. Now let me tell you what I discovered the next day, because that's when the hospital staff accidentally revealed something my parents never expected me to learn. The next morning, I returned to the hospital again. This time, I spoke to a different nurse. She didn't know about the visitor restrictions. When she pulled up my grandmother's chart, she frowned. Then she said quietly, "That's strange." I asked what was wrong. She turned the monitor slightly so I could see it. Under emergency contacts, my name had been removed, deleted, and replaced with only 2 names: my mother, my father, and that attorney. That's when I realized the truth. My parents weren't just lying to the family. They were trying to make sure my grandmother and I never spoke again. After discovering my name had been removed from the hospital records, I didn't leave. Instead, I waited. Hospitals are busy places. Shift changes happen. People move quickly. About 40 minutes later, the same nurse from earlier walked past me in the hallway. She stopped, looked around, then quietly said, "If you want to see her, now would be the time." I walked slowly into my grandmother's room. She looked smaller than I remembered. Her breathing was steady but weak. Machines hummed softly beside the bed. For a moment, I just stood there, because I realized something painful. If I hadn't come that day, I might never have seen her again. Her eyes opened slowly when she heard the chair move. "Natalie?" she whispered. I nodded. "I'm here, Grandma." Her expression changed immediately. Relief. Real relief. "I thought they kept you away," she said quietly. And in that moment, I understood something. She knew. "They told me you didn't want to visit," she said. "They said you were too busy." My chest tightened. "They told everyone the opposite," I replied. "They told the family I refused to come." My grandmother closed her eyes for a second. Then she sighed. I knew something wasn't right. I asked her about the attorney, Daniel Harris. She nodded slowly. "He came here with your parents," she said. "They wanted me to sign papers." "What kind of papers?" I asked. She looked directly at me. "Inheritance papers." According to my grandmother, my parents had been visiting the hospital after hours, not to spend time with her, not to comfort her, but to convince her to change her will. They wanted the entire estate transferred to them, the house, the savings, everything. And they didn't want me involved. My grandmother refused, several times. She told them the will already divided things fairly between family members. But my parents kept insisting, day after day, until finally she did something they never expected. She reached slowly toward the bedside drawer. Inside was a small digital recorder, the kind people use to record voice memos. "I started recording our conversations," she said. "Every time they came." My heart skipped. "You recorded them?" She nodded. "Just in case." Then she looked at me seriously. "Natalie, if anything happens to me," her voice trembled slightly, "I want the truth to come out." I squeezed her hand gently. "You're going to be fine," I said. But deep down, I already knew the situation was serious. She handed me the recorder. "Give this to Daniel," she said. "The lawyer. He knows what to do with it." I looked at the small device in my hand, realizing what it contained. Evidence. Evidence my parents never imagined existed, and evidence that would eventually be played in front of our entire family. 2 weeks after my hospital visit, my grandmother passed away. The funeral was held on a gray Thursday morning. Nearly the entire extended family attended. Cousins, aunts, uncles, even relatives who hadn't visited her in years. And by the time I walked into the funeral home, the story my parents told had already spread to everyone. You can tell when a room has already decided something about you. People don't speak. They just look. Some avoided eye contact. Others stared openly. My aunt whispered something to my cousin when I walked past, and someone behind me quietly said, "I can't believe she never visited." I said nothing, because I knew something they didn't. My father stood near the front greeting relatives. My mother looked exhausted in a way that seemed performative. Several people hugged them. "I'm so sorry for everything you went through," one relative said. My mother nodded sadly. "We did everything we could for her," she replied. And then she added the line that made my chest tighten. Unfortunately, Natalie didn't want to be involved. Later during the service, my father stood up to speak. He talked about my grandmother's kindness, her generosity, her love for family. But then he said something else. "Family means being there for each other," he said. And sadly, not everyone understood that. Several people turned their heads toward me. The implication was obvious. After the speech, my cousin approached me. Her expression was cold. "You could have visited," she said quietly. "She kept asking about you." I nodded slowly. "I know," I replied. She looked surprised, but before she could ask anything else, someone else stood up. A man in a dark suit stepped forward. Daniel Harris, the attorney. The same man my grandmother had told me about in the hospital. He cleared his throat. There is one more request from Eleanor Brooks that must be honored today." The room became quiet. My parents froze. The lawyer opened a small folder. Inside was a document. And something else. A small digital recorder. The same one my grandmother gave me. He held it up for everyone to see. My client asked that this recording be played after her funeral service. The moment my mother saw the recorder, her expression changed. Color drained from her face. My father leaned toward the lawyer quickly. "What is that?" he asked. The lawyer answered calmly. "A message your mother left." And then he added one more sentence. "For the entire family." Relatives looked confused. Some leaned forward in their seats. Others whispered quietly, because no one knew what was about to happen, except 3 people: my mother, my father, and me. The lawyer placed the recorder on the table beside the podium. He pressed the play button. The small device made a soft click. Then the room filled with the sound of my grandmother's voice. "Daniel," she said slowly, "if you're playing this recording, then something has gone very wrong." And my parents stopped breathing. My grandmother's voice filled the quiet funeral room. It sounded weaker than I remembered, but steady, clear. "If you're hearing this," she said slowly, "then I'm no longer here." A few relatives lowered their heads respectfully, but my parents weren't listening like everyone else. They were staring at the recorder, completely frozen, because they knew what was coming next. "I want the family to know something," my grandmother continued. "During my time in the hospital," she paused, "my granddaughter Natalie tried to visit me. Several relatives shifted in their seats, but she was not allowed to." My mother's hand gripped the armrest of her chair. My father looked straight ahead, not blinking. "I was told Natalie didn't care," my grandmother said, "that she refused to come." But that was not true. Her voice cracked slightly. My granddaughter was kept away. Several people turned slowly toward my parents, because the story they had been told suddenly didn't make sense anymore. Then my grandmother continued. And the reason was simple. They wanted me to change my will. My aunt gasped quietly. My uncle leaned forward, and my parents looked like statues. "Every day," my grandmother said, "they brought papers for me to sign. They wanted the house. They wanted the savings. They wanted everything transferred to them." Her voice hardened slightly, but I refused, and that is why I began recording our conversations. The room went completely silent. "If my family is hearing this now," she continued, "then those recordings have already been given to my lawyer." The attorney beside the podium nodded slowly, confirming it. My grandmother's voice softened again. "Natalie was the only one who tried to protect me. She visited me when she could. She listened. And she respected my wishes." I felt my throat tighten slightly, because those were the last words she ever recorded. The recording ended. For a few seconds, no one moved. Then the room slowly turned toward my parents. The same relatives who had been judging me earlier were now staring at them. My aunt shook her head quietly. "You lied to all of us." My mother opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. My father stood up suddenly. "We should go," he said quickly. But no one stopped looking at them, because the truth had already done its job. They didn't need to defend themselves. Everyone had heard enough. After the service ended, relatives approached me one by one. Some apologized. Some looked embarrassed. Others simply nodded quietly. But the most important thing had already happened. The lie my parents told the entire family had finally been replaced by the truth. And sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't shouting, it's simply letting the truth speak for itself. Thank you for staying with me through this story. If you haven't subscribed yet, consider joining the channel. Stories like this are shared here every week. And tell me in the comments, have you ever been blamed for something you didn't do, and later the truth came out? I read every single comment. There's another story waiting for you on your screen, and when you're ready, I'll see you there.